የሐሳብ ገበታ ሐሳብ ያለ ልዩነት ሚዛናዊነት እንዲሁም በአሳታፊነት የሚንሸራሸርበት ቤት። በሐሳብ ገበታችን ወቅታዊ፣ ማህበራዊ፣ ፖለቲካዊ እንዲሁም የሕግ ጉዳዮች በስፋት በጥልቀትና በአካታችነት ይቀርባሉ። የሳምንቱ እንግዳም የሳምንቱ በተጋባዥ የማህበረሰብ አንቂዎች፣ ፖለቲከኞች እንዲሁም ሙያተኞች የሚቀርቡበት ፕሮግራም ወቅታዊ ጉዳይ፣ ወቅታዊ ሀገራዊ ጉዳዮች የሚዳሰሱበት ዝግጅት፣ የውይይትና የክርክር መድረክ፣ በተለያየ ጎራ የሚገኙ ታላላቅ ፖለቲከኞች፣ የማህበረሰብ አንቂዎች እንዲሁም ሙያተኞች በሐሳብ ዙሪያ ፊት ለፊት የሚወያዩበት ከዛም አልፎ የሚሟገቱበት ፕሮግራም፣ ህዝባዊ መድረክ፣ በተለያዩ ጉዳዮች ላይ ሁሉም የሐሳብ ገበታ ቤተሰቦች በቀጥታ ሐሳባቸውን የሚያቀርቡበትና ተሳታፊ የሚሆኑበት ለቤተሰቦቻችን እድል የምንሰጥበት ጊዜም። እነዚህና ሌሎች ሳምንታዊ ፕሮግራሞችን ለእናንተ እናቀርባለን። ይህንን የተወደደ ቻናል ሰብስክራይብ በማድረግ ቤተሰብ ይሁኑ፣ በስፋት ተደራሽ እንዲሁም ለሌሎች ያጋሩም። የሐሳብ ገበታው እንዲጠናከር በተሻለ ጥራትና ስፋት ወደ እናንተ እንዲደርስ በሐሳቦ በሙያውና በገንዘቡ ይደግፉን። የሐሳብ ገበታን በሱፐር ቻት፣ በሱፐር ታንክስና በሱፐር ስቲከር አጋርነቱን ያሳዩን። በጎፈንድሚ አማራጭ የሐሳብ ገበታን ያበረታቱ። ስለ ሐሳብ አስተያየቶ እንዲሁም ድጋፎም እናመሰግናለን። ዓላማችን የሐሳብ ማህበረሰብ መፍጠር ነው። የሐሳብ ገበታም
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good evening.
Good evening, yeah.
This is Mr. Rasmus Sonderriis. He's a journalist, pro-Ethiopian, and a regular commentator on the Ethiopian politics and the Horn of Africa affairs. And he was particularly active, as you know, during the war in the northern part of Ethiopia. And he is also, very importantly, the author of a book, Getting Ethiopia Dead Wrong. Welcome back to the buffet of ideas, Mr. Rasmus.
Thank you very much. And your show really lives up to its name. It is a big buffet of ideas. You manage to talk to people who are on opposing sides of a war. That's really impressive. So it's quite important what you do. And I'm excited to be here. I know a lot of people will agree with me. A lot of people will hate what I have to say, but that's fine. I wish we could just talk rather than killing, or if we could just vote and talk, that would be wonderful.
That would be wonderful. Yeah, voting it seems to be high in the sky for us, and we'll talk about that. It has become an aspiration than a part of a regular politics, and we'll get to that and related issues. And let me start with because I said welcome back, and because this is the second episode. A year ago we had an interview. I think it's more than a year now. And the Pretoria peace agreement on Monday, it's going to be the third anniversary of the Pretoria peace agreement. And I think the time flies. It has been more than 3 years. And I will ask you whether a lot has changed or more of the same thing or different dynamics and actors. So we'll talk all about that. But first of all, why did you choose the title Getting Ethiopia Dead Wrong? Are they still getting Ethiopia wrong, or has things changed over the last 2 or 3 years?
Yeah, I think things have changed. I chose the title because all the people that I'm aiming for, they got Ethiopia dead wrong, some on purpose, some by mistake. I think there hasn't been like a big mea culpa, like we got it wrong, we're so sorry, we shouldn't believe in all the Ethiopian genocide hashtags, we'll never do that again. There hasn't been much of that. But I think in diplomatic circles, there has been some learning, definitely. I'm thinking back, when Pretoria happened, I felt so vindicated because that's what I'd been saying all along, right? Ethiopian military triumph will lead to peace. And they have been saying, it's a last chance to stop genocide. If we don't have foreign military intervention, all the Tigrayans are going to get killed. And we were saying, no, this is the path to peace. And we were vindicated on that score. But you have to be self-critical. I'm thinking back. I remember these interviews with Deda Demese, the Ethiopian-American lawyer from Boston. And he was saying, Ethiopia is finished with revolutionary front, this liberation army, that. Now we just talk. But that was too optimistic. I shared that optimism, and unfortunately we were wrong on that. We're not out of the woods. Ethiopia is still a lot of trouble, still people getting killed for political reasons that shouldn't have to be killed. So yeah, there's still a lot to do. And also Pretoria hasn't really resolved everything. It hasn't been fully implemented. There's still a Tigrayan military. There's supposed to be no Tigrayan military now. So yeah, it's a mixed bag. Sorry, no sound.
Yeah, we'll unpack some of those issues you have already pointed out. But first, before that, I would like to stress on one issue. Why are you interested in the Ethiopian politics? Why are you obsessed, and why are you defending on behalf of Ethiopia? Generally, why are you interested in the nitty-gritty of the Ethiopian politics?
Okay, so I came to Ethiopia in 2004, and I've stayed more or less half the time since then. Without revealing too much, I can say I have personal reasons to be in Ethiopia, and yeah, I just love the country. I have 3 countries. You can see 3 flags here behind me. They are my 3 countries. Of course, I'm not an Ethiopian. I'm more of a Danish guy. Grew up in Denmark, but also I have Chilean passport, and I would say I can manage within the Chilean culture much more readily than in Ethiopia. But every day in Ethiopia, you learn something new, right? That makes it so exciting. And I do love the country. I think it has a great future, great potential. I feel very welcome always in Ethiopia, and I see myself continue to live in Ethiopia. And I think this country would realize its potential, right? Be prosperous, rich, strong nation as it deserves to be. Also, the thing I've learned in Ethiopia is that, religiosity is something that I didn't grow up with. And I've seen how much it means to people and in a good way, right? So it's changed my way of thinking in so many ways.
Mm-hmm. So, because you talk to people, I monitor media on a daily basis, and I know what is going around, including those people you have been dealing with on social media, including X. So some of them call you that you are a paid activist on the government payroll, and then some of them, and the good amount, say that you are pro-Ethiopian. And how would you describe yourself?
I don't only speak for myself, right? I don't claim to speak on behalf of anybody. Yeah, I think I'm pro-Ethiopian. The funny thing is, if people agree with you, they think, oh, you have great insight, you really get it, and if they disagree with you, they think you're a clueless foreigner. I don't take that very seriously. Some of the same people who supported me during the war with the TPLF, they invited me home. Rasmus, he gets it. Finally, a Ferengi who understands the Ethiopian mentality, who's immersed himself into society and knows our history, this and that. And then when I didn't agree with the Fano insurgency, Rasmus is a clueless foreigner, typical white guy who doesn't get it. What can I say? I don't care very much. I just say what I think. I don't speak for anybody. I don't speak for any government. I'm not related to my own government in Denmark, Chile. I've never met a guy from Abiy's administration. I still feel free to criticize him. So yeah, I'm just my own man.
Great. That's why I asked you how you describe yourself.
As a friend of Ethiopia, somebody who loves Ethiopia, would love Ethiopia to be a strong and prosperous nation, and for all these people to overcome political violence, have human rights, all the things that I take for granted, right? Because I've had a privileged upbringing in Denmark, with education and health guaranteed and decent wage. And I would love for all Ethiopians to have that too.
Great. Some of the foreign observers, so the Ferengis, to use your own word, Ethiopia is understanding. Ethiopia is just like peeling a garlic. The more you try to understand, the more layers it would get, and the more complicated it would become. So, how much of Ethiopian politics and the social fabric have you come to appreciate and understood? Let's say over the last 5 or 5 years or a decade.
That's a good question. I don't like to, blow my horn and say now I get it, because it's not like that. It's true. I do think there's a temptation for foreign journalists to just write and say whatever is sellable. Like there's this famous guy, I don't know, Kapuscinski, who wrote about Haile Selassie, and is so sensationalist and it's just dripping with salaciousness, and I don't like that. But I would say when I came in 2004, I was pretty uncritical. I was not critical of Meles Zenawi back then, and the election in May 2005 really taught me, gosh, this guy is so unpopular. This regime is so unpopular and so, so brutal and crude. And it's all about power and staying in control. They don't really care about developing the country. And if they do, it's only as a means of staying in power. So, yeah, I guess I still have a lot to learn. That's the thing about Ethiopia. You always have neutral. I think Ethiopians have a lot to learn too. When I try to explain Ethiopia to foreigners or to other Danish or Chilean people, they always ask, is the government right or left? And you can't really say. It's not like a right to left scale, but there is a lot of ideology. Like your view of Ethiopia's past, what should the role of ethnicity be, autonomy. There are ideological issues. They're just different.
Yeah, have you actually you hit at one of the most important issue in the Ethiopian politics, the role of ethnicity. I know that it is very tempting to make some observations or conclusions at first glance, but living in Ethiopia, and how would you describe the role of ethnicity in the Ethiopian affairs generally?
Well, if you go to the big cities, people get along fine. It's not just that they tolerate each other; they're actually good friends, neighbors. They work. They found businesses together. They get married. But then there is, of course, a tendency to disagree on certain issues based on ethnicity, or maybe to not talk about politics because it can be delicate. I remember that, especially with all the Tigrayans. There's so many Tigrayans in Addis Ababa. There was this idea that, we love our Tigrayan neighbors and friends and even relatives, but we try not to talk politics with them because they sympathize with the regime and we don't. That was very common, I have to say. And now I think, maybe we should have talked to them. And of course, a lot of them would have agreed with us, we should talk. But that's maybe as much as I can say. I don't want to exaggerate the role of ethnicity. A lot of people here in Europe, they think ethnicity is some kind of like caste, almost like a race, something you're born into and you can't change. You can change your ethnicity. You can just declare, no, I'm no longer Amhara, I'm Tigrayan. No, I'm no longer Tigrayan. You can change it. It's possible. It's just different language, maybe. The Volcaid, it was called Volcaid Yamada Manet Amelash, identity restoration. It was not called we want Volcaid to be Amhara. It was called we want to have our Amhara identity. We want to call ourselves Amhara, right? So an identity is a fluid concept. So don't think that ethnicity is some kind of caste system.
But are people at each other's? Are peoples in Ethiopia at each other's neck, as some observers try to portray?
No, of course not. No, they're not at all. But there are people who use ethnic hate to mobilize for war. Absolutely.
So recently, in the most recent interview, Martin Plaut, one of the actors and those people on the cover of your book, we'll get to that, gave an interview in English to one of the Tigrayan media, and he said that he would not call it a genocide precisely because the people in Addis were not trying to eliminate the Tigrayans, and because people normally get along with each other as normal as it used to be.
Yeah, it finally dawned on him. He didn't mention any figures. He said they were arrested, but I think Reuters said 18,000 Tigrayans were arrested in Ethiopia outside of Tigray, right? 18,000 out of maybe 2 million. And half of them were released quickly after. And the 9,000 who stayed behind bars, mostly they were military, right? So, maybe that dawned on him, made him think. Who knows? I don't know what goes on in Martin Plaut's mind. But I don't think anybody serious would call it a genocide anymore. They kept saying before Pretoria, there's going to be a genocide. There will be a genocide unless, right? And then suddenly the war was over and, there had been a genocide. And they used that term. Now, that's not to say that it was easy to be a Tigrayan during the Tigray War. I know it was not. They felt suddenly, some of them had to make sort of loyalty oath, or their neighbors would not greet them, or they felt that they were suddenly being eyed up as a threat in the city where they felt home. So I'm not saying it was easy. That's not nice. But of course, you have to put it into perspective. The threat against the capital, Addis Ababa, was being marched upon, and it could have been a big bloodbath. So of course, in that kind of climate of fear, people do unjust things. It was a lot of innocent Tigrayans, I'm sure, were caught up in that, and that breeds resentment. So, yeah, we what we need now more than anything is reconciliation. Whenever I walk around in Addis Ababa, I listen to a lot of Tigrayan folk music in cafes, and it always makes me happy. I think it shows the will to reconciliation. And a lot of Tigrayans are coming to Addis Ababa right now. They're fleeing Tigray to go to Addis Ababa.
Of course they do, because Ethiopia is their country.
Right, yeah.
Why should it be an exception? Why should it be surprising if Tigrayans are moving to the other part of Ethiopia? Should it be even an issue to begin with?
Absolutely, yeah. But if you want the narrative is that Ethiopia is in a grip of anti-Tigrayan hate, then they wouldn't run to Addis, would they? They would run anywhere else, maybe. But no, they are coming, and I hope they will be treated well.
Even the word coming is not even a perfect description, because they are already there. It's just basically about those who are fleeing from fear of persecutions and the recent crisis and instability, whether it is social, economic, or security.
Yeah, last time around when they wanted to fight for preserve their loot from their years in power, 27 years in power, the TPLF bosses, they managed to convince a lot of Tigrayans that they only had the choice. They had no other choice but to fight or be killed. This time, if they tried to pull the same trick again, I don't think many young Tigrayans will believe them.
So once you have already started this issue of genocide, the rhetoric, why, in your view, why do insurgents love genocide hashtags more than anything else on this world?
Well, it did work quite well.
The Ethiopian insurgents.
Yeah. It worked wonders for TPLF for a long time, right? They got a lot of attention. So it's just copycats trying to use that. And also when you're fighting an elected government, even for all the flaws that Ethiopian democracy has, or you could even say it's not quite a democracy yet, but there is a democratic space. So you have to have a very high bar for taking up arms in such a situation. You can't just say, because we think we're going to lose next election, so we're going to start killing soldiers and local officials. And no, you have to have a really good, serious case. And genocide is one such case, right? So that's kind of like the only thing that will work. But now they're saying Amhara genocide. Again, you have, is it 60-70% of Addis Ababa's population is Amhara? Amharas are everywhere. The elected Amhara officials are in government in Addis Ababa. They can't all be collaborators. That's ridiculous. They are the moderates, the moderate majority. And the same with Oromia. You go to Oromia, I think the OLA is probably the most unpopular of all the rebel groups. Most Oromos that you meet, they absolutely love Ethiopia. They don't mind speaking Amharic and Oromo, and of course they don't want Fano to win any battles, but nor do they want the OLA. They want to live together with a lot of Amhara people living in Oromia peacefully. They're under threat from extremists for sure, but again, no, there's no genocide in Ethiopia. There are some serious political, I would say, breakdown in political culture in many ways, that you have to resolve or try to settle disputes with violence. But the vast majority of people, the moderate majority, they don't want that. They'd rather have an imperfect democracy than civil wars and regional conflicts.
Speaking of the Amharas in the government structure, a few days ago, Mr. Iskender on my show said that all of them are the puppets How could
Yeah, he compared them to
more than
Vichy
3
France.
millions? To put it in perspective, because the Prosperity Party, at least it claimed it has more than 13 million members. And out of those 13 or 14 million, to take the number at its face value, around 3.5 million of them are from Amhara. So how is that the case, that all the 3.5 million, or to be fair, at least the hundreds of thousands of Amhara leaders be considered as or regarded as the puppet with no political agency?
And the Vichy France government was appointed by the Nazis, right? By the invaders. This one is actually an elected government. I believe Eskender, certainly the people around him, recognized those elections at the time. Even the French resistance didn't claim that the Nazis were trying to kill all the French. Like
by the way, Eskender himself was a candidate in that election.
Right. There you go. Yeah.
From prison.
From prison. Okay. Well, you shouldn't be in prison, but there are also limits to how much you could call for violence.
But at least he accepted the legitimacy of the election and he participated
as
a candidate.
Right. Yeah.
I'm just giving you the fact.
I heard that interview and he said he was going to talk to the international community to explain his case. I thought he did a terrible job, because at the end of the interview, you didn't get any idea what is he fighting for, apart from this claim that there's a genocide. He had a grand vision of being against identity politics, yet he is the leader of an ethnically exclusive militia. He said, we're not a conventional ethnic-based organization, but we are an ethnic-based organization. And so what other ethnic groups are you working with? He couldn't say anybody. He just said many. But is he saying, is he working with the OLA, with the TPLF? I don't think so. If he wants to say that, he couldn't do it in public. When he said for international actors, who's he talking about? Eritrea? I don't think so. Nobody's going to come from abroad and fight and die to change the government in Ethiopia. He just didn't have a case. Why is he killing Ethiopian soldiers? Why is he waging war? The Romans I just talked to you about, for example, they are pro-Ethiopian. They love Menelik. They do not demonize Ethiopian history. They don't go around wanting to tear down statues. They don't want to rename Addis Ababa to Finfinne. And they don't support Fano. Shouldn't they be at least within this broad group that he talks about with this grand vision of ending identity politics? If he can't even get their support, then who's he going to change Ethiopia with? Of course, there is a space. There's the National Dialogue Commission that's going to come up with a new proposal for constitution. Not everybody's going to like that, but at least there's a space to say what you think. You have to use the democratic space, even if it's too restrictive. You have to use it to expand it. I just find it really sad. He's fighting in the bush. I'm not denying that he's sacrificing a lot, but I just don't see that he has any hope. And by the way, every time he said the word unity, he was not talking about Ethiopian unity. He was talking about unity within Fano. Even within his own movement, there's no unity. It's just crazy. It's just, I think it must be, I can understand when they began to take up arms at Fano, that Fano was popular, right? Because it just repelled the TPLF invasion of Amhara. So they were popular. But now, what is the prospect? There's really nothing. They really should lay down.
But But in that interview himself tried to justify why they had to mobilize in the name of ethnic Amhara. He was saying that they had to defend themselves in the face of the onslaught of genocide. That's what he said. And their case is different. It's unique, and it has to be treated accordingly. That's what he said.
Right. Well, just to be fair to him, it's true that a lot of the other ethnic extremists have scapegoated Amharas, right? They've been called colonialists. He said they've been called, like, they colonized Ethiopia. Why do we all have to speak Amharic? That's true. There are extremists on the other side too. But then you have to work with the moderates, right? You have to seek out the moderates and work together. If you can't work across ethnic divides, or, even within the PP, there are Amhara PP who are a bit Amhara nationalists. There are Oromo PP who are a bit Oromo nationalists, but they don't fight. They try to talk it through within one party. They have
But are they talking
ways of fighting.
to be fair? Are they talking? Is there a talk even within the PP to begin with?
Well, I don't know. I would imagine so. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you look, for example, at Al-Qaeda, the way Western Tigray, as the TPLF likes to call it, that northwestern corner of Ethiopia, I'm sure that the PP Amhara are pushing PP at the federal level to keep that out of TPLF's hands, for example, I would imagine.
I mean, so far, well, we can't tell about what they do behind the scenes, but generally, the only actor in town is the prime minister, and I don't personally think, but it's not my personal view, but I don't personally think that they could defy the authority of Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed. So within the PP, I don't see any democratic procedure, even if there is an avenue. Of course, there are platforms where they can air their concerns. But generally, all I see is an authoritarian tendency where a one-man show is getting visible by the day.
Right. That's a fair criticism. I don't know what goes on inside the PP, and I don't feel called to defend the democratic culture of PP. But I do see there's a National Dialogue Commission. There's the election coming up next year with some space for dissent. I would suggest people use that space if they're not happy with the government.
Yeah, exactly. That's what you said on your Twitter. You said to accuse of genocide is to justify insane criminal violence against Ethiopia's elected government, long before peaceful means of political settlement have been exhausted.
Exactly.
So don't you think that they have exhausted all available remedies?
Absolutely not. No. At least you need to, be robbed of your election victory at the very least, right? Like Kenneth did back in 2005. And even in that case, I think they had a justified case for rebellion, but I don't think it was a wise case. They probably make a big blunder. I think Berhane he recognized that they should have just taken up their seats in parliament, accepted, the verdict of the election commission, even if it was. So first, if you want to start killing people, it's got to be legitimate. It's also got to be wise. And I don't think you can find any armed insurgency in Ethiopia today that comes anywhere near any of those criteria.
All right. So to be fair to Mr. Iskander, here is what Iskander had to say. These highlights of the preview. Let's see.
Mm-hmm. Whoever is in power, whether it should be the TPLF, whether it should be the OPDO, the current, people in power who have real power. So these are puppets. They do not represent the real interest of the Amharas. This is not, like I said earlier, this is not fighting, against the prime minister. This is not only fighting against, the PP, one party. This is about changing the era of our politics. The moment, this identity politics was embraced by the state in 1991, Ethiopia became the exception in Africa. And we need to go back, to the norm, to the convention.
That's what he said. I mean, part of what he said.
Right. So this idea that actually the PP is the same as the EPRDF and TPLF because there was no sort of revolutionary change, no change of constitution. That is his point. But there is a dialogue commission aimed at changing the constitution now. It will come up with a proposal next year. There has been huge changes in politics, in Ethiopian politics. I don't think you can say that, the PP that went to war with the TPLF is the same as the EPRDF. It makes no sense. And then he has this grand vision of abolishing identity politics, but what could be more identity politics than an ethnic militia? And again, he can't even unite Fano, right? So it just seems so hopeless.
Yeah, as you said, a lot have changed since the EPRDF, but that's true. A lot has changed, but persecution of Amaras. So somebody could say a lot have changed, but then the persecution of Amaras, the killing of Amaras have also increased under the current government. So what would be, don't you see a merit in this argument?
Do you think the government is instituting sort of institutionalized discrimination against Amharas? Do you think there's a case for that?
I don't believe so, but we don't know who is killing. But the killing
No,
is
the
there,
killing's
persecution is
absolutely
there.
outrageous, of course. But I don't think I mean, he said that the Wallaga massacre were committed by government forces. Maybe they were infiltrated by some local forces from the government. That's possible. But let's remember, the federal government is at war with the Oromo Liberation Army, and a pretty dirty war that it is, right? I don't think there's any love lost between those. And it's kind of an internal Oromo matter, but it's very, you can't in good conscience say that the PP Oromo is on the same side as the OLA. That's crazy. But it's true, there have been massacres, and the people who commit those massacres, of course, that's what they want. They want to incite the idea that Amharas are being persecuted so they can create a response from Fano, so then they can maybe get Fano to commit a massacre, and then they will commit a massacre. I mean, that's the agenda, right? But these forces...
But there are things but there are things where all the Oromo, I mean, whether you are Oromo or Amhara or Tigrayans, it doesn't matter. Since if the system is flawed by design, and if the regions are drawn after a dominant ethnic group, so if the Oromia belongs to Oromo, the Tigray belongs to Tigrayans, I mean, according to the logic behind it,
right,
as well as the philosophical underpinnings, would suggest that is a logical conclusion to the design. So if it is your land, then all others are disposable.
Yeah, that's true. There are many Amharas who have land in Oromia, but still, you're right. Maybe there's a case against ethnic federalism. That's why Eskinder Nega should lay down arms and try to join the National Dialogue Commission and contribute to that.
What is in it there for him if he lays down?
Exactly.
Once he lays down, it's his arm.
Yeah, if he's not even talking on behalf of Fano, who's going to listen to him? That's true. Maybe he won't get that much influence because he's not so popular. He doesn't have that much support. Maybe that's why he's using violence instead of talking and arguing. Yeah.
All right, and this leads to another observation, which is why are you on a collusion course with all ethno-nationalists of all stripes? I mean, that's my observation. Why are you on a collusion course?
I don't know if I'm I'm only against the armed ethno-nationalists. I'm not against people being proud of their heritage and culture and language. Not at all. If, for example, the Romos who complain about the Roma language being marginalized, all I have to say is use it. Nobody's stopping you from talking Oromo. Use it. Make films, make movies, make magazines. Use it. I'm not against the ethnic pride at all, or in a cultural way, in a positive way.
Yeah. So then the issue is, you are right in that regard. Nobody is suppressing their cultural rights and even autonomy, and they are being ruled by one of their own, and that's also another fact. And they belong to the ruling party, whether we like it or not. That issue we have already settled. But then there is another counterfactual, Rasmus. You have been in Ethiopia and involved with Ethiopian politics for almost more than 10 years or 2 decades now. Why we have the proliferation of armed insurgencies only under this regime or at this particular time, while there was none in 10 years or 15 years ago? So
That's
what's the coincidence here?
Yeah, that's a good question. If you remember the beginning of Abimania, it was that the promise of democracy, of freedom of expression, but that also kind of lets the lid up. Then you have all this resentment boiling underneath. That could be part of the explanation, sure. Whereas during Meles Zenawi, we had a pretty rough autocracy, a dictatorship that didn't allow any dissent, so people knew what would happen, and then came Haile Mariam Desalegn, and it began to crumble slowly, disintegrate the whole oppressive system. But another point you said, so people get to be ruled by their own. That's also the problem with, if you dissolve ethnic federalism, then what do you have? Do you want to reintegrate the Afar people into Wollo? I don't think they want that. I think they want to be able to speak Afar within their local parliament. So you have to have some kind of ethnic autonomy in some way as a
would be
condition for
design.
loyalty.
I think we are not short of constitutional design for that. There could be a hybrid
No,
mechanism where two or more language could become the local language, and then you give them full cultural autonomy, as long as the politics is not based on ethnicity primarily, and the regions are not. The states or regions are not exclusively given to respective ethnic groups. That's all we need to trim. I mean, I'm not going to present my proposal here. I'm just saying that there are many ways of fitting constitutional designs to the current Ethiopian reality.
You're absolutely right. And I don't have the answer to this constitutional conundrum. All I can say is I hope it can be resolved through dialogue and agreement and not through war. That's all I have to say about that.
Yeah, great. Okay, let's get back to your book, Getting Ethiopia Dead Wrong, and talk a little bit. Do you feel vindicated? And to be more precise, where are these people on the cover of the book? Where are they now?
Right, so they still have careers, most of them, except one that I'll come back to. But I think maybe a bit more low-key. You had Kjetil Tronvold saying, actually, he was, this is the guy on top, right, next to Mark Lowcock, the Norwegian guy, and he was saying, actually, I told a group of diaspora Tigrayans that there was another option than fighting to the death, which was just laying down arms, giving up. Now, you can decide, we don't want to fight. We think we're right, but we don't want to fight. So he admitted that there was such a solution, right? Where he was saying throughout the war that actually, no, they have to fight to the death, and that's why they're going to win. So that's interesting. I think a lot of people from the cover of that book have become more silent, or they've moved on to other subjects. I don't know if they've had an internal introspection. Certainly no public mea culpa should be expected. But then there's one guy, Tony Magana. He was this neurosurgeon who was working in Mekelle. Maybe he even did some good work, I don't know. But he began to become a truth witness about the most sadistic, disgusting rapes and with hyenas and this and that. And he fed inputs to Jan Nussen's death toll for the Tigray war. And I noticed Ethiopians have been writing about him on social media, that he was he lost his medical license in Florida for 20 sexual assault charges, which is quite remarkable given that he was talking about sexual assault. He was accusing Ethiopia of biological warfare with HIV contagion. And it turns out that he was a convicted sex offender. He was 1 year in prison for battery. So I thought, I can't publish that without being absolutely sure. And I looked into it. I even found his fingerprint. And after this book came out, he completely withdrew from public life. He never talked about Ethiopia again. I don't take credit for discovering it because it was discussed on social media, but I do take credit for his retirement from talking about Ethiopia. Now he's meek as a lamb. He only tweets out like paintings. He doesn't talk about politics anymore. So that's something. He's not invited to any podcasts anymore, but he still features as an authority in El País, in that an infamous article from El País, which they come up with this death toll, and they really have no serious study to base it on. Not that I know how many people were killed in that terrible war, but I do know that this guy is over. He's not going to go into Ethiopian politics again. That's the only. And the rest,
what about the other protagonists? Because there are a lot of people. Can you walk us through some of these people? I mean, quite few of them at least.
Yeah, Alex de Waal, for example, he talked a lot about famine. Now he's an expert on famine apropos Palestine and Gaza. Will Brown, he's working for something else. He's not writing about Ethiopia anymore. Tom Gardner, the economist man, he actually wrote a book about Ethiopia, where in many ways this claim that there was starvation was used as a weapon, he didn't kind of withdrew that more or less in the book, but he made some outrageous claims about Ethiopians being fine with rape, basically, using anonymous quote from a businessman he talked to in Harare, saying, "Oh, those Tigrayan women, they had it coming." And he used that as an illustration of how Ethiopian feels about rape. I thought it was outrageous. How can you get away with that, right? And in general, this is something that bothers me a lot about journalistic ethics. If you use anonymous witness about rape instead of forensics, instead of taking it to court, that is very dangerous. That is falling on the wrong side of incitement to hate. It's not championing human rights, it's incitement to hate. You can use anonymous quote to say, "Oh, everybody's complaining about the price of groceries," or "the mood is like this or like that." But to talk about such incendiary things and just throwing it out there as if it means nothing, I think it's really insidious. It upsets me. I would never do that. I use anonymous quotes, but I would never use it about something, use anecdote to substitute for forensics about serious crimes. It is a very fine line between inciting hate and championing human rights. And that fine line is the truth, right? And we can only know the truth through evidence, not through some journalist talking to somebody. He won't even tell who it is. I want to know who that businessman in Harare is who said Tigrayan women deserve to be raped. I want to know his name. I want to know the psychopath's name, and I want to see his photo. So Tom Gardner, show us who was that, because somebody like that does not deserve anonymity, right?
Yeah. Speaking of genocide, I think over the last year or so, that rhetoric has somehow subsided. And first of all, do you have the same observation? And if so, what do you think is the reasons behind that?
Yeah, kind of genocide fatigue. I think diplomats roll their eyes and people are sort of becoming wary of this claim. Yeah. I mean, you can only cry the wolf so many times, right? And people start to disbelieve it.
Yeah, even the leaders, the Tigrayan leaders themselves were questioning the numbers, the motives, and all those stuff. For example, the TPLF leader was saying that the talk of genocide was a hoax, basically. That's what he said last year. And now Sadkan was saying that some of the figures were over-reported or exaggerated, and some others are also somehow coming to terms with the reality. Even some journalists and at least three of those people on the cover of your book are in a way having a nuanced approach to the issue.
Right, yeah. That's great, yeah. Because Sadkan, he was saying like just a week or two before Pretoria, he was asked by the Heritage Foundation something about what would these occupation soldiers from Ethiopia do. And he said, "Oh no, the aim is not to control the territory, the aim is to exterminate the population." He said that. Unbelievable. But people know that, you know, if the war is dirty, the propaganda was even dirtier.
Now, yeah, that actually brings us back to...
They just let him get away with it. Why doesn't anybody say, "Stop, this is not true"?
Well, I don't think that is going to stop anytime soon, unless there are some sort of cognitive learning in this regard. If you can hear me, this brings us back to the original question and the title of your book. So, are the international communities still getting Ethiopia wrong, or are there some sensible approach to the Ethiopian politics in terms of reporting, the victim politics, and even about the nature of insurgency?
Yeah, it's a very general question, of course, so I'll give a general answer. I think they are getting it better. I think at least international community is becoming more wary of claims of genocide, and everybody's very keen to get on with Ethiopia, right? To be friends with Ethiopia. They know there's no alternative. They know any of these insurgent groups, if they were to, heaven forbid, march to Addis Ababa, it would just plunge Ethiopia into chaos. So yeah, I think they've learned something. And they can see how the TPLF has split in two camps. You could say the hardliners and the moderates. And obviously the world will side with the moderates. It's normal. And they will favor the chances of reconciliation. There's also the fact that now the hardliners are actually allied to Isaias, which was something uncomfortable for me to defend Ethiopia's alliance with Isaias, because I know what kind of regime that was. But okay, fair enough. In war, you don't get to pick your allies. But now Ethiopia is not on the side of Isaias, right? I mean, I don't want it to come to blows or to war, but there is a lot of tension. And in a way, it makes it easier for me to say, look, Ethiopia is fighting an autocratic regime that's closely allied with Russia. And so it becomes more natural for the West to side with Ethiopia now.
Great. So now let's talk about the specific. Why are you against this insurgent group? Because you said, God forbid. So why are you vehemently against this insurgent movement, this FANO, OLA, or the TPLF, whoever they are?
Yeah, it's funny that one more thing they have in common, right? They're very different in ideology, how they see history, but one more thing they have in common is they hate to be compared to one another. So they're of course very different, but yeah, basically they don't have any prospect of leading Ethiopia. They can't even bring about unity within their own ranks. And I just don't think politics should be ethnic. If you say you're against ethnic politics, like Skender says that, but then you shouldn't do ethnic politics. And again, I think I'm not a pacifist, but I have a very high bar for using violence, and it is legitimacy and wisdom, wisdom in the sense that you can bring about positive change. And I don't think they have any of that. They need to exhaust all peaceful avenues for change. And if you lose an election, you can always come back. There's another chance next time. And if the elections are unfair, you can still push to try and change them, to change the climate. There are many things you can do. I don't believe that Ethiopia is anywhere near where you can justify armed insurrection.
All right. Now let's move to the Tigray politics. We don't delve into the details of the Tigray politics. It is already messy enough. Yeah. It is so messy. I will even for the Tigrayans. What do you make of the Pretoria agreement after 3 years? Now it's almost 3 years anniversary. What is the missing link in the Pretoria agreement? Because the TPLF issued a statement today in the morning, I think in English, following the Prime Minister's speech a couple of days ago. What is the missing link there? And who is at fault in terms of implementing the Pretoria agreement?
Well, the main provision is that the TPLF should just cease being an armed force. They should not have any weapon. They should not have any army. And they should definitely not make alliances with foreign actors. So I think definitely you can't argue TPLF is not in compliance, right? The only point they had was the IDPs from Volkai, that they should be allowed to go back. And apparently they're allowed to go back, but that's not really what the TPLF wants, right? We know they want control of the territory. They did. So that's why I think it's very important for the international community to hear the word ethnic coexistence. This is about ethnic coexistence. It's not about whether this territory belongs to this or that region. It's about ethnic coexistence, and this should be our goal. On all the other points, I think the government is in compliance, and TPLF is not.
Can we squarely put the blame on one side while exonerating the other party to the agreement, just like that?
Yeah, the only thing would be the IDPs. More should be done maybe to help them come back, but I know it's a complex situation. And now apparently the TPLF is blocking the IDPs from going back. If this is true, it needs to be called out. Yeah. It was, you could say, an unfair treaty in the sense that the TPLF lost that war, right? So they had to sign, for some it was surrender terms. A lot of them didn't agree with it at the time. A lot of them criticized it. I think that's part of what Abiy is getting at. The people who signed it, they're in Addis Ababa with me, he was kind of saying, and the people who were skeptical about it, now they're invoking it, but they're sitting in Mekelle, and they can't go through Addis Ababa if they want not travel out abroad, for example, because they would get arrested. And they're smuggling and committing crimes, and it's a very sad situation. I just feel really sad for the Tigrayans. In a way, some people may think it would have been better if there hadn't been any Pretoria and Ethiopia just taken over the area and began to govern it well, but there would probably have been a smoldering insurgency, and then Ethiopia would have been blamed, right? So this is kind of, letting the poor Tigrayans be stuck with the leadership they've got until they have enough, right, and rebel against it. And I think that's partly what's happening.
So that raises an eyebrow here. A couple of years ago, or at least in the past, during the war, and even in its aftermath, most of the Tigrayan activists would blame the external forces, including the prime minister and other Ethiopians. But now, over the last 2 years, it is basically the internal implosion. So can they rightfully blame anyone other than themselves and their own leadership, at least after 2 years of experimentation with a post-conflict governance?
No, you're right, they can. And they had some peace-seeking moderates in charge, and they were ousted and had to flee Mekele. Getachew, it's so bizarre, right, to see him. He was calling Abiy a child killer and whatnot, and boasting about directing his artillery to Dese, and now he's like a friend. I know this is very hard to stomach for a lot of Ethiopians, but it is in the interest of reconciliation, and he's playing a constructive role now. Who saw that coming? I didn't see that coming back in.
Is it part of reconciliation, or maybe the Ethiopian version of Game of Thrones?
I think it can facilitate reconciliation, because it will give proud Tigrayans a good reason to say, look, we can't continue to fight against Ethiopia, or we have to embrace our Ethiopianness. And I hear they need some green in all that yellow and red up in Tigray. It's good to, could be a way for them to reconcile with Ethiopia. I really hope so. But it is hard to swallow, right? To see Getachew suddenly changing, all these young people killed over nothing. It feels wrong.
It feels wrong, and it's very hard to swallow and process, as you said.
Yeah,
so
I agree.
that's why many people are suspicious even about the move, and that's why I brought in the Game of Thrones thing, that if you really want to play the game and successful, you have to be closer to the court.
Yeah, there's definitely some of that too, right? Some Game of Thrones in that. And I remember already in April 2023, you had Getachew and Abiy suddenly they were on a stage, sharing a stage together, handing out peace stuff to one another, whatever. And all the Ethiopians I met, they were like, nah, we don't like this. This is wrong, because what about all the people who were killed? It's not right. So, but that is politics the hard way. I just think what Getachew is bringing now is too valuable to have on the past, right? He even said in an interview that some people should give a public apology. I think he meant to the Tigrayan people, and he was one of them. So,
So, based on your observation after all that war rhetoric, the wound and the scars of war itself, which is not healing yet, very visible, and the climate of fear and the distrust, and now we see a sudden change of mood, at least at the highest echelon of governance, including Getachew. Do you think that reconciliation is possible? Because you kept on mentioning reconciliation.
Yeah, of course, I think it's possible. Yeah, it will take time. Maybe the diaspora will not be the first. There's some hardliners in the diaspora. They will not be the first. But yeah, it will start. It will come. You still have these 2 million Tigrayans living in Ethiopia outside of Tigray. Maybe it's even more now. and they will go back and forth and intermarry, and it will continue. It will take some time before they start using 3 colors rather than just red and yellow in Tigray. It will take some time.
But do you see a gradual change of moods? That's what I'm saying.
I heard somebody. I heard somebody say they're listening to Amharic music again in Tigray.
Okay.
Is that true? I haven't been to Tigray recently.
I mean, people always do in private. I mean,
right.
Mekelle used to be. The Amharic. Well, culturally speaking, Mekelle used to be the center. It used to be even more vibrant than Addis in terms of playing all the latest release, even in 15, 20 years ago. I know for a fact. Of course, the war has changed a lot of things, including the social fabric and our world view. I think this is a micro. I think this is as a micro level, but at a macro level, because when you walk on the street of Addis, that's what I'm saying, as a neutral observer at least, do you see a change of perception and the mood among the general public in Addis, as compared to 3, 4, 5 years ago, or as compared to during the emotions, the raw emotion during the war?
Yeah, I definitely don't hear any ethnic hate from anybody. I never did. Change the perception. Certainly, the support for Fano has gone down a lot. I do talk to taxi drivers a lot. Not that this is not a representative cross section. It's not a scientific survey, but taxi drivers come from all walks of life, and people are pretty honest with a foreigner in a taxi. Yeah? You'd be surprised. So, but I don't know. But I just think people want to move on with peaceful life, and you don't get any sort of ethnic hate from people. That's for sure.
Yeah. Actually, even though we talk about ethnic, that is not the only thing important in the Ethiopian.
No, people complain a lot about other things. Yeah, like bad public transport and rising prices.
Yeah, exactly. We will move to the economic affair, but before that, you have been saying that all these ethno-nationalist groups are sharing in a way the same mother. You didn't say that, but you said they're copy-paste. What do you mean by that?
No, with the genocide hashtag, sure, they have that in common, and that they are disunited within their own ranks, that they use politics as an excuse for crime and enrichment. They have many things. I write in my part 5 of my book, I write a bit about what they have in common, but of course they differ completely on ideology and the view of Ethiopian history. If you listen to Fano, they glorify, they romanticize the past, right? And Roma Liberation Army, they do the opposite. They demonize the past. Everything was wrong in the past. So they have their differences, but they could never agree on anything, that's for sure. They could never govern together.
Yeah, my question is primarily related to the wartime propaganda. How do they conduct a propaganda, and why are most people still falling for it if it's a propaganda? Or why are they amassing a large group of supporters? If they are unpopular, why are people still supporting Fano or Ola?
I think people in diaspora, they get more support from percentage-wise from diaspora, not the whole diaspora, of course, than they do within Ethiopia. And the diaspora does have money to send.
Would that be the justification? I mean, you could have money, but you can't throw your money unless you believe in it.
Yeah, you have to have a victimhood story today if you want to justify mobilization for war. It's not enough to say we have a grander vision than you, or we are right about how society should be. You have to have this victimhood story.
Now, we didn't talk about Ola specifically, so I will ask you just one question. The current regime or government, the government of Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed, is generally regarded as that of the Oromo domination. If that is the case, I mean, logically speaking, why would the Oromo group, as represented by Ola, fight against their own government?
Exactly, but it's not an Oromo government. That's nonsense. I mean, it does have a lot of Oromos. They are the most numerous groups, right? But they're also a very diverse group. And it's a multi-ethnic government, right? It's a broad coalition of people from many parts of Ethiopia, as it should be.
And why are they fighting then? I mean, beyond this, beyond the parameter of
well, you could say, because there was such a thing as the Abyssinian Empire. Maybe it goes back to that. Like, whenever you have an empire, you have some locals who will say, oh, great, these new rulers, maybe they impose things on us, but they also bring some good things. That's how it used to be, right? That's not justifiable today. We don't want empires anymore. But that's how it was 150 years ago or 100 years ago, when you had Amharic-speaking rulers, maybe in an Oromo peasant population. Okay, we learn to speak Amharic, and we will rise within Amharic-speaking society and serve the emperor or whatever. And then you have other people say, no, they are traitors. We want to fight for our culture to stay, within our Garda system or whatever. That's normal. It happened during the Roman Empire in Spain. It always happens, right? It goes back to that maybe. But today people, I was saying OLA demonizes the past, Fano romanticizes the past, but most people, they just want to look ahead, right? They don't want to be obsessed about the past. And they want to foster a future where there's equality. I admit the Amharic language is so dominant. They should stop worrying about that issue, because it's almost impossible to control. Nobody can control language development or spread. It's very hard. And if you do worry about it, well, use your own language. Use it as whatever language you favor, use it. But just don't fight over it, because it is almost impossible. People will learn Amharic because it is the most useful language in Ethiopia.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So let's move to the last issue with regard to these insurgent groups. There is now this Grand Alliance, what they call SIMDO, and I think in Tigray SIMDO, it is a grand. So a rough translation would be a Grand Alliance among. So now it is transnational. So Eritrea, TPLF, Fano, some faction of Fano, and possibly Ola. Do you consider this as a reality or just a mirage? What binds them together?
Whether it's a reality, I don't know, but it is pie in the sky to think that would work, right? Can you imagine, heaven forbid, OLA and Fano taking over Ardkila? They wouldn't even agree on the name of the city that they're in, right? They would be fighting immediately. So the only name I could come up with for such an alliance would be the coalition to destroy Mother Ethiopia. And who would benefit from that, right? Maybe the sponsor, the regime in Asmara, would benefit from that. Maybe they see that as their ticket to survival, to destroy Ethiopia. I don't think so. I don't think that's the ticket to survival. I think, well, maybe for the regime, I don't know, but definitely not for Eritrea to prosper. It's not the path, right? They need a prosperous Ethiopia for them to trade with and exchange with. So, no, I don't know if it's a reality. I don't think so. I don't think they could agree on very much. But to the extent that it is a reality, or it would just be a temporary alliance to sow as much chaos and hate and destruction as possible. It's disgusting, actually.
And what's really binding them together? Do they have things in common?
No, only they wish to overthrow Abiy Ahmed, and then they can start to slug it out after that.
And would they succeed in doing so? I mean, I'm just.
No, I don't think they will succeed. No, I don't think they will succeed. Of course not. I would have to be very gloomy to think that. Yeah, I'm a natural optimist, and it's definitely not what people want.
I understand that the people may not like that unfolding, including myself, but I'm referring to the reality. So when we talk about the possibility, it is not about the ethical, the moral dimension. It is despicable, you can say that, but is it even would that be realized in a way? I mean, Eritrea would benefit for sure, as a pattern, as a principle.
Yeah, the regime would benefit, not Eritrea as a country, of course. Yeah, I mean, it is a threat. It is spine-chilling to even think of if it were to become.
But who is the sponsor, the main sponsor in all this?
Yeah, I don't have any proof that it's Eritrea. Everybody's saying, it could be true. Certainly, if you judge by their propaganda channels, they seem to support all of these groups, right? You had the size of Hawarki going on about Oromuma government, and then the OLA would say, "Oh, but Oromuma is not bad," "Oh no, we didn't mean it like." I mean, he's trying to balance all these opposing forces to keep them under his sponsorship, perhaps. But whether they're actually sending money or training, I don't know. Certainly.
Would you rule out the role of Egypt, because Isaias himself was running to Cairo since yesterday?
Egypt would have the resources. That's true. That would be very dangerous. There have been some claims, right? The Economist said that Egypt had been funding Fano. I don't know if that's true, but that would be really, really threatening if that's true.
Now let's move back to economy as we wrap up our discussion. The Prime Minister, when I say Prime Minister, I'm referring to Abiy Ahmed, was giving us a very rosy picture of the state of Ethiopian economy. What do you make of the Ethiopian macroeconomic reform? It has been more than a year now, at least. I think it's 16 or 17 months since the reform. It was in July 2024, if I'm not mistaken. So what do you make of the state of economy?
Yeah, I'm very much a supporter of pro-market reforms. I've seen how it has transformed my other country, Chile. Yeah, I lived more than half of my adult life in Chile, and I've seen how it went from a rather poor to a rather relatively rich country in very short time span, and that was thanks to open markets and free trade. But it's not really the Ethiopian tradition, right? Usually the government wants to control the economy more than have it grow, right? So you can see that, for example, they floated the bird, but then they didn't quite float it. They have some market reforms, but so yeah, it's very difficult, and the people are not well off in Ethiopia. You know how low salaries are. There has been a lot of inflation. That's also partly the cost of all these wars. So, but yeah, I'm optimistic. Now they're inaugurating GERD, and gold mines are expanding, and and plus you have this huge potential.
What has that got to do with the ordinary life of the people?
Yeah, it will take time for salaries to rise, for sure.
Not even I mean, that is one indication, but even during the EPRDF, the gold mining was there and the economic booming was there. But in terms of the triple effect of economy and the income distribution, because that is a healthy assessment of economy, it was never there. It has never been there for the poor people, and now it is only getting worse. So.
Well, one thing I've learned from Chile is what you need to do as a government is you have to focus your social spending on the poor. So bad thing, for example, to subsidize petrol, like they are indirectly doing now through the exchange rate, that's not good policy. It's much better than to subsidize food, say, or fertilizer, or things that the poor rely on, or public transport. So, yeah. If I were a politician, I'd probably paint a rosy picture and throw in a lot of adjectives for whatever view I had. Maybe I would say, "Oh, things are terrible. Don't trust the government. Vote for me instead. I'll make everything wonderful." That's how it is in a lot of democracies. You have all kinds of promises, but economics is complex. It takes time to improve. But there's definitely a lot of enterprise in the Ethiopian population, and I do believe they need economic freedom. That's the only thing that creates prosperity.
I think for the Ethiopian people at this particular moment, they need state protections than economic freedom, and economic freedom is where the the fundamentals are in place. In this transitional period where millions of people would be affected and uprooted by the impact of economic reform, the state intervention is much more important than having just a freedom.
Sure, I believe state intervention should be targeting pro-poor measures, not, trying to set the exchange rate or regulate everything or price controls, nothing of that, but just helping the poor directly. That's the best way you can do without distorting the economy too much.
The other aspect of prosperity or change, just to use a language, is the transformation of Addis Ababa over the last few years, and including the corridor development or redevelopment. What is your observation about the corridor development and its impact, multifaceted impact on the socioeconomic the situation in the country?
Well, you hear both people who love it and people who hate it. Of course, it's not nice if your house is knocked down and you have to move on short notice. Yeah. So, but it is wonderful to see these wide boulevards and new parks. This time they're really thinking of parks and green spaces. So yeah, and cycle lanes. Now we just need some bicycles.
But how is the city generally? That's what I'm asking. I know the impact is felt. It is everywhere. But in terms of the transformation of the city physically, the infrastructure part.
Yeah, it is a bustling city. It would be very interesting to see if it grows now, if salaries also increase. Of course, I feel sorry for the people who have their houses knocked down in the city center. Now they have to live in some faraway condominium where the public transport is poor. Yeah, I understand the people complain. It's not the way politics would be done in a very democratic country, that's sure. There is still some authoritarian approach in the way it's done. But on the other hand, people admire it, people love it. I don't know what to say. It's I'm very happy I'm not a politician in Ethiopia. I wouldn't know what to say.
I'm just asking you your observation, actually.
Neutral observation. No, my neutral observation is that some people like it, but it's kind of ambiguous because also some people don't like the way they don't like the lack of compensation and the speed and the short notices for people to leave their homes, and but overall, the city is bustling and it's going to grow a lot. And it's also growing in population size. But definitely public transport is a must, right? If you move people to the outskirts, you have to have good public transport.
But even within the city, what is the point if you can't afford to live in the city?
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, that's true.
Let's finally talk about the politics, the geopolitics of access to the sea. And now this issue is one of the hot potato in not only in Ethiopia but in the entire Horn of Africa. It's touching the nerves of all those countries surrounding Ethiopia, and for obvious reasons. Besides the conspiracies, and I see three issues which are very important within the rhetoric of access to sea and port from the Ethiopian point of view. One is the Prime Minister himself has been consistently, and this time around, I'm referring to the most recent remark in the parliament that's saying, whether you like it or not, Ethiopia is going to have access to the sea. And for sure, I'm quoting him, it won't take 30 years as it took us to lose the port and access to the sea. That is from the rhetoric point of view. So the Prime Minister believes in that, is so firm, and now it is, and that sentiment is shared by even the generals and military generals and the media pundits. The other issue is the relationship between Ethiopia and Eritrea, as you may know, has exacerbated, and the tensions are high, and there is no rapprochement, and the diplomatic ties probably is at its lowest point. That's the second issue, and then the third obvious scenario is there is much talk about the outbreak of war again between Ethiopia and Eritrea. Now, these are on the rhetorical side of the issue, but generally, the crux of the matter is that Ethiopia wanted to have or restore its lost glory, if you put in the language of Prime Minister, or generally Ethiopia wants to have access to the sea because it cannot afford to be landlocked and a geographic prison forever. So what is your assessment of this issue?
Right. Well, it's good that he's saying 30 years because it does leave some time, right? I certainly wouldn't recommend just attacking Eritrea, invading, annexing. That's not. Maybe some countries, without mentioning names, could get away with that, but probably not Ethiopia, right? It wouldn't be the wise thing. The only thing that would be legitimate to use force is if Eritrea attacks, or if the sponsorship of insurgent groups in Ethiopia becomes too blatant, right? But having said that, I absolutely understand the bitterness of Ethiopia. There's no parallel in history of a country just giving up its coastline like that. And, you know, it happened because Eritrea actually had a hand in the regime change in Ethiopia in 1991, right? You could say they put in place a friendly government that then gave them. They think, of course, that it belongs to them. Fair enough. You can say, you know, Ethiopia doesn't have a legal claim, but it has a moral claim, right? And it has a practical claim. The population size, the history, and, you know, it's just a very small piece of desert. If Eritrea had any sort of enlightened approach to it, they would just say, okay, let's negotiate. They could start offering things like tariff-free access, open borders, infrastructure to serve Ethiopian ports. They could do many things, right, to just soften tension, but they do the opposite. No, it's ours, and we're not going to give it, and we don't have to, and we don't have to because we don't want to, and we don't want to because we don't have to, and nothing to discuss because the law says like this, right? Yeah, but that's just unreasonable. In that case, I don't want to talk about force, but then Ethiopia could say, okay, we lost the coastline because of a regime change in Ethiopia. How about we get it back after a regime change in Asmara? Would be, you know, there could be an uprising by the Afar people in Eritrea to be able to see their kinsmen on the other side of the border. There are many things that would happen to Eritrea that please let me be clear, but I'm not advocating for any kind of use of force, right? I'm just advocating for Eritrea to be reasonable, because no people on earth would just accept the landlocked situation of Ethiopia. Such a big population, and the way it happened, I can understand why they're bitter. Look, I can compare to another case that I know well, because I'm Chilean also, apart from Danish. And it's not to say what's right and wrong, right? It's just an interesting comparison. So Bolivia and Chile, they had a war, began in 1879. Yeah, that's how long ago it was. And Bolivia withdrew from that war after a few years, and the war went on. It's called War of the Pacific. It lasted until 1885. And Bolivia lost its coastline. Like, it's not like they were building cities or there were any Bolivian cities, but it was Bolivia on the map dating from the time of Spanish colonialism. So they felt that if that war hadn't happened, they would have been able to build their cities. They would have had a coastline. And still today in Bolivia, they celebrate the Day of the Sea every year with little children, you know, pumping their fist into the air saying, "Who took our sea? The Chileans took it. We want it back." And so imagine, and that's a small country, Bolivia, and it has privileged access. The treaty with Chile says they can take out their goods tariff-free. They can own port facilities. They can keep dangerous materials at the coast. Chile has to spend so much money on good highways and this and that. And still, they're still bitter about losing the sea. And this is so many years ago, right? So back in 1975, Chile actually offered them a corridor to the sea. in the northern part of Chile, on the border with Peru, and Peru vetoed it because they had a treaty with Chile as well that allowed them to veto it. And still, it's such a hot issue. And Chile and Chile and Bolivia, they don't have good relations, right? They don't even have embassies and they don't have diplomatic relations. And this is something that happened so long ago, right? And make no mistake about it, if Bolivia had any chance of winning a war, they would have attacked ages ago, right? And so Eritrea thinks that they can keep out right now 130 million, soon to be 200 million population from sea access. It's just unrealistic. They need to negotiate something, offer something. And then maybe, also Ethiopia has a very good claim in saying this is not irredentism. It's not like we want to own population centers or we want to rebuild an empire or something. We tried Somaliland. They wouldn't let us do that either. We just want some small sea access. But okay, if they are stubborn, if Eritrea is stubborn, doesn't want to offer anything, not even open borders, nothing, sure, we need patience. We don't need another war. So that's why it's good if the prime minister is saying it's not going to take more than 30 years, but still it could take, some time.
But you also said whether you like it or not, we are going to have it. It means that either by hook or crook, Ethiopia is going to secure its access to the sea and restore its standing on the Red Sea.
Well, unlike me, he's not a commentator, he's not an observer, right? He's a national leader, so he has to imbue the public with the spirit of we can do it, right? It's
okay. Probably that's part of the politicking. So do you see the prospect of a war breaking out, given the atmosphere and the rhetoric? The war breaking out between Ethiopia and Eritrea, and if that is the case, what would be your advice, or what would be your take on it, rather?
Of course, I can't rule it out, but I don't think so, and I hope not. Of course, I certainly don't think Ethiopia should not just attack to annex territory. I don't think anybody's thinking of that. I hope not, because that would not go down well internationally, and it's not that urgent. It's not that urgent of an issue. It will come sooner or later if they're patient. Now, I wish, if Eritrea would change and become a free country and with open borders, then maybe it wouldn't matter that much, right? Like Switzerland is doing fine because they know they can rely on ports in Belgium and France and Germany, and they compete, and so the prices are always kept low. But the Horn of Africa is not like that, right? You can have a friendly government one moment, then suddenly it becomes an enemy. They seal the border. And when Ethiopia accepted Eritrean independence, it was not in writing, but it was kind of understood that they would remain friends and the borders would be open. You could fill a truck in Addis and drive it to Asmara and sell whatever was in your truck, right? That's how it was in the beginning. That didn't last. So it completely changed. I think Meles Zenawi, he regretted it, right? He kept talking about give and take, and he regretted it, but it was his rotten statesmanship that made that happen. I'm not a Meles nostalgic. I know some people are. I think that was a terrible mistake, even if though you could argue that Mengistu also did his to lose Eritrea, right? Because he alienated them with his brutality, and he just made them want to leave Ethiopia. So I'm not decrying Eritrean independence.
I don't think Mengistu or his regime ever wanted Eritrea to leave. Actually, it is the other way around. It took it.
Yeah, but if you're so brutal, if you're too brutal in the way you treat, there was a brutal regime, the Derg, right? So it just makes the Eritrean think, maybe we would do better on our own rather than being.
Well, it was brutal against everyone. Actually, it was equality in repression. So I don't think that the Mengistu regime targeted any group, either ethnically or ideologically. It was just brutal against any group which raises arm or questions its power.
Right.
So I don't agree with the way he handled, I don't even want to say he, but the way the Derg regime handled it was wrong. But they were too nationalist. But in terms of alienating them and targeting an Eritrean to the extent that they wanted Eritreans to secede from Ethiopia or to leave, I think that would be overstretchment.
Right.
Yep.
Sure.
So,
but from what I hear, the Christian Highlanders, they were kind of unionist, and the lowland Muslims were not so much. They were more separatist. Is that true? Is that how it was during Haile Selassie?
I think it is more than that. This is binary. The Eritrean nationalism was one of the I think is called simulated nationalism, like a created nationalism. It is a nationalism which was engineered. So this is one of the narratives, and of course, there was a division and societal variation between the highlanders and the lowlanders because of history and religion and ethnicity and allegiance and all that. But generally, the Eritrean politics was delicate and it wasn't handled well. That's all I can say.
Right, but all nationalism are engineered at some level, right? And it's not a bad thing. It's good if you have a strong national identity, especially if you're different ethnic groups. So I don't regret, or I don't decry.
But the Eritrean is out of this world. That the Eritrean, they literally created nationalism from the scratch in a way.
Right,
that's what I'm saying.
Sure. But I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. Yeah. What's bad is for Ethiopia not to have the reliable access to the sea, right? Because that it's going to be a problem. It could be a problem. Who's going to invest in export industries if they are afraid that port access is going to be expensive? Djibouti is a monopoly. Monopolies are always more expensive. So, but it's not an urgent issue. Definitely not. Urgent is ending the internal wars in Ethiopia, getting more freedom to Eritrea, development. That's urgent, right?
But as long as these two leaders are in power, I mean, Abiy and Isaias, and they are not in good terms, and it seems that they are incompatible. I mean, they are mutually exclusive. They can't live together. Of course, they can live in peace together, but that I think that train has already left the station. And now it seems that even it is for the first time that the Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed explicitly were mentioning Isaias and Eritrea and making all those incendiary speech for the first time. Right. And that shows for me diplomatically that is like the highest level of tension and the diplomatic I would say crisis between the two countries and two regimes. So, and now that would also bring us to the last question I would have for you. Assuming that the war will break out at some point, assuming that against your wish and against all odds, then there will be a war. And people are saying that since Abiy is unpopular and alienated, and now the Fanos, the Ola, TPLF, TDF will align with Eritrea, they say, bring it on. Actually, that's going to be the end of Abiy's regime. Do you think that would be the case?
No, I don't think it would be the case. But that's also why I don't see that war coming unless Eritrea wants it really badly. And I don't think it's definitely not in anybody's interest, neither in Isaias nor Abiy's interest.
I mean, I know that, but they are saying that Abiy is so unpopular and he will have no one rallying behind him. Therefore, actually, it is a good opportunity to get rid of.
Don't you think the vast majority of Ethiopians support Ethiopian nationalism, including the aspiration for sea access?
Well, generally, I'm just asking. I mean, personally, if you ask me, and I made that statement a couple of days ago in America on a different media, I said the ASAB agenda is one of the most popular agendas. So I wouldn't underestimate the power of Ethiopian nationalism rallying around the flag and even supporting the Abiy's move. But generally, I'm asking you your own take. If your take about that statement people are making, they're saying that if Abiy starts a war, in short, that would be the end of his
yeah, no, I don't think it would be the end of his rule. No, I don't think so. But it would be something that Ethiopia cannot afford, right? Another war.
Yeah, we all agree that
it would postpone development. It would create. It's not what we want.
Yeah. So with that, what would be one thing that you would like our audience to know about Ethiopia and about yourself as well?
About Ethiopia, don't buy the rhetoric. I would say to people who are not Ethiopians, don't buy the victimhood rhetoric. It's usually disguised for something else. So I'd rather go with the optimists. Engage with Ethiopia, even if you don't have to condone the excesses of the security state, but understand that the root problem is these ethno-nationalist insurgents, it creates a climate of fear that can lead to crackdown and excesses, but the root problem again is these insurgents, the ethnic politics, and yeah, I think it's a country that's going to make a lot of progress in the next decades.
And what would you like to see in the coming years?
I would love these wars in Oromia and Amhara and to end, and for the Tigrayans to get rid of the old guard. So that's not too much to ask for.
Well, I think we'll have to stop here for today. Mr. Rasmus Sonderriis, the author of Getting Ethiopia Dead Wrong. It was always it's always a pleasure, and it's nice talking to you today. I hope this is not the end of our chat and talking about Ethiopian politics. Let's stay optimistic, as you said, and what is going to do and condone the war. Yeah, I mean, we have to
thank you very much, and keep talking to everybody, keep asking all the relevant questions in your own very nice way, always leaving the door open for conversation, even people who disagree violently. That's well done.
Yeah, thanks so much. And that brings us to the end of our show. Thanks so much for tuning in and listening to our discussion for today. That's it. Have a good Halloween, and we will see you soon with our other shows in the coming days. Have a good night. Have a good day. Bye-bye.
የሐሳብ ገበታ ሐሳብ ያለ ልዩነት ሚዛናዊነት እንዲሁም በአሳታፊነት የሚንሸራሸርበት ቤት። በሐሳብ ገበታችን ወቅታዊ፣ ማህበራዊ፣ ፖለቲካዊ እንዲሁም የህግ ጉዳዮች በስፋት በጥልቀትና በአካታችነት ይቀርባሉ። የሳምንቱ እንግዳም የሳምንቱ በተጋባዥ ማህበረሰብ አንቂዎች፣ ፖለቲከኞች እንዲሁም ሙያተኞች የሚቀርቡበት ፕሮግራም ወቅታዊ ጉዳይ፣ ወቅታዊ ሀገራዊ ጉዳዮች የሚዳሰሱበት ዝግጅት፣ የውይይትና የክርክር መድረክ፣ በተለያየ ጎራ የሚገኙ ታላላቅ ፖለቲከኞች፣ የማህበረሰብ አንቂዎች እንዲሁም ሙያተኞች በሐሳብ ዙሪያ ፊት ለፊት የሚወያዩበት ከዛም አልፎ የሚሟገቱበት ፕሮግራም፣ ህዝባዊ መድረክ፣ በተለያዩ ጉዳዮች ላይ ሁሉም የሐሳብ ገበታ ቤተሰቦች በቀጥታ ሐሳባቸውን የሚያቀርቡበትና ተሳታፊ የሚሆኑበት ለቤተሰቦቻችን እድል የምንሰጥበት ጊዜም። እነዚህና ሌሎች ሳምንታዊ ፕሮግራሞችን ለእናንተ እናቀርባለን። ይህንን የተወደደ ቻናል ሰብስክራይብ በማድረግ ቤተሰብ ይሁኑ፣ በስፋት ተደራሽ እንዲሁም ለሌሎች ያጋሩም። የሐሳብ ገበታው እንዲጠናከር በተሻለ ጥራትና ስፋት ወደ እናንተ እንዲደርስ በሐሳቦ በሙያውና በገንዘቡ ይደግፉን። የሐሳብ ገበታን በሱፐር ቻት፣ በሱፐር ታንክስና በሱፐር ስቲከር አጋርነቱን ያሳዩን። በጎፈንድሚ አማራጭ የሐሳብ ገበታን ያበረታቱ። ስለ ሐሳብ አስተያየቶ እንዲሁም ድጋፎም እናመሰግናለን። ዓላማችን